Princess Zara Kethrian of the Luminari Empire had lived for 347 years, and in all that time she had never been wrong about someone. Her people possessed an innate ability to perceive the essence of other beings, their strength, their potential, their worth, with a single glance. It was a gift that had guided the Luminari to become one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, their empire spanning 42 star systems and counting. So when the human delegation arrived at the Imperial Palace on Luminar Prime, Zara assessed them with the practiced efficiency of centuries. Ambassador Chen, competent, diplomatic, moderately intelligent. Captain Rodriguez, brave, loyal, limited strategic thinking. Dr. Patel, brilliant mind, weak constitution. And then there was him, David Miller, listed simply as cultural liaison in the diplomatic manifest. He was unremarkable in every way, average height for a human at 5'10", brown hair cut in a simple style, hazel eyes that seemed perpetually uncertain. He stood at the back of the delegation, his posture suggesting someone trying very hard not to be noticed. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost apologetic. When addressed directly, he stumbled over his words like a child learning to speak. Zara's luminescent blue skin dimmed slightly with disappointment. The humans were a young species, barely entering galactic politics, and she'd hoped they might offer something interesting. But this David Miller registered as practically nothing on her perception, a weak spark, barely worth acknowledging. Someone who'd likely been given his position through connections rather than merit. She dismissed him from her thoughts entirely. That was her first mistake. The negotiations were tense from the start. The Luminari Empire wanted exclusive mining rights to 3 asteroid belts in human-controlled space, offering technological advancement and protection in return. Earth's representatives wanted fair trade agreements and cultural exchange without surrendering sovereignty. It was a dance Zara had performed 1,000 times with 100 different species. Ambassador Chen presented Earth's counter-proposal with professional courtesy. Zara countered with terms she knew they'd find difficult to accept. Back and forth, the verbal chess match continued for 3 hours, neither side yielding ground. Then David Miller spoke for the first time. "Forgive me, Your Highness," he said quietly, his voice barely carrying across the negotiation chamber. "But I noticed something interesting about the Luminari legal code. Article 7, Section 12, Subsection 9. It states that resource extraction agreements must provide proportional benefit to indigenous populations within affected space. The 3 asteroid belts you've requested contain settlements on 14 moons and habitats. Your current offer doesn't account for their compensation." The room fell silent. Zara's golden eyes narrowed. She'd intentionally obscured that detail, buried in thousands of pages of documentation, hoping the humans wouldn't notice or wouldn't understand the implications. Yet this insignificant liaison had found it. "An obscure technicality," she replied smoothly. "Hardly relevant to—" "Actually, it's quite relevant," David continued, his voice still soft but gaining quiet confidence. "Because according to the Galactic Trade Commission Charter, which the Luminari Empire signed in 2387, failure to comply with indigenous protection clauses invalidates the entire agreement and subjects the proposing party to sanctions." He paused, offering an apologetic smile. "I'm sure it was just an oversight." Zara felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Surprise. The human had not only found the loophole she'd created, but had traced it through 3 separate legal frameworks to demonstrate exactly how she'd intended to exploit it. And he'd done it while making it sound like an innocent mistake on her part, allowing her to save face. She looked at him more carefully. He still seemed unremarkable, still stood with that self-effacing posture. But there was something in his eyes now, a hint of sharp intelligence carefully concealed beneath a mask of humility. "You're correct, Mr. Miller," she said slowly. "An oversight indeed. Will revise the terms accordingly." Ambassador Chen shot David a grateful look. Captain Rodriguez seemed confused about what had just happened. But Zara's mind was racing. How had she misread this human so completely? Over the following days, as negotiations continued, Zara began to notice a pattern. Every impasse, every difficult moment, every subtle trap she'd laid, David Miller quietly identified and disarmed them all. He never grandstanded, never drew attention to his contributions. He would simply lean over to Ambassador Chen, whisper something, and moments later the negotiation would shift in Earth's favor. Zara's perception had never failed her before. Yet somehow this human registered as weak and insignificant while demonstrating capabilities that surpassed even her most accomplished diplomats. It was impossible. It was infuriating. It was fascinating. She began to study him outside of negotiations. David spent his evenings alone in the palace gardens, sitting on benches and reading from a data pad. He took his meals in his quarters rather than joining the other delegates at formal dinners. He moved through the palace like a ghost, barely noticed by anyone. Yet Zara now saw the truth her perception had missed. The way servants smiled when he thanked them by name. He'd learned all their names in 3 days. The way palace guards relaxed in his presence rather than maintaining rigid formality. The way he'd positioned himself during a tense moment to subtly block an aggressive Luminari noble from invading Ambassador Chen's personal space, diffusing a situation before it escalated. David Miller wasn't weak. He was careful. He wasn't insignificant. He was strategic. And he wasn't uncertain. He was observant, watching everything, calculating constantly behind that mask of humble incompetence. On the 8th day of negotiations, Zara made her move. She found him in the gardens after sunset, reading beneath the light of Luminar Prime's 3 moons. He looked up as she approached, surprise flashing across his features before being carefully concealed. "Your Highness," he said, starting to stand. "Please remain seated." Zara settled onto the bench beside him, her formal gown pooling around her like liquid starlight. "I wanted to speak with you privately, Mr. Miller. I'm flattered, but I'm not sure You can drop the act," Zara interrupted gently. "I know what you are." David's expression didn't change, but his eyes became guarded. "I'm just a cultural liaison, Your Highness, nothing special." "You're the most dangerous person in your delegation," Zara said. "Possibly the most dangerous person in this palace, and you've been pretending to be harmless since the moment you arrived." For a long moment, David said nothing. Then slowly something shifted in his demeanor. The uncertain posture straightened. The apologetic expression faded. The soft voice gained quiet strength. "How long have you known?" he asked. "I began to suspect on the 1st day. I became certain by the 3rd. Zara studied him with new appreciation. "My perception told me you were nothing. That's never happened before. It's never wrong." It wasn't wrong, David replied. I'm actually quite average, average strength, average speed, average everything by human standards. I'm exactly what I appear to be physically. Then how? Your perception measures power as you understand it, David explained. Physical prowess, mental capacity, force of will, the qualities the luminari value. But humans evolved differently. We survived not by being the strongest or fastest, but by being the most adaptable, the most patient, the best at understanding others and using that understanding strategically. He leaned back, gazing up at the moons. I studied Luminari culture for 5 years before this mission. I learned your customs, your laws, your psychology. I knew you'd dismiss anyone who seemed weak by your standards, so I made myself appear weak. It allowed me to observe, to learn, to prepare responses to every strategy you might employ. You manipulated me, Zara said, though there was more admiration than anger in her voice. I negotiated, David corrected. There's a difference. I never lied to you, never deceived you about facts or terms. I just let you underestimate me, and in doing so I saw things you didn't expect me to see. Zara laughed, a genuine sound of delight that surprised them both. Remarkable. 3 centuries of life, and I'm still capable of being completely wrong about someone. You weren't completely wrong, David said. I am physically unremarkable. I do lack the inherent power your people possess. The difference is I've learned to make those limitations irrelevant. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the gardens peaceful around them. Finally, Zara spoke again. What else have you observed about me, David Miller, since you've been watching so carefully? David hesitated, then smiled slightly. You're bored, desperately bored. You've lived for centuries, negotiated with dozens of species, and none of them challenge you anymore. You can predict their moves, anticipate their strategies. So you create elaborate games like these negotiations just to feel something interesting again. Zara felt her breath catch. It was true. Every word was true. In 347 years, no one had understood her so completely. You're also lonely, David continued softly. Your perception means you always know what people want from you, what they're really thinking. You can never truly be surprised by anyone, can never let your guard down, so you maintain distance, play the role of the imperial princess, and hide how exhausting it all is. Stop, Zara whispered, but there was no command in it. How do you know these things? Because I recognize the signs, David said. I've spent my entire life being underestimated, being dismissed, learning to see what others miss because no one expects me to be watching. And I see you, Zara, not the princess, not the immortal luminari noble. I see someone brilliant and powerful and utterly exhausted by being both. Something cracked in Zara's carefully maintained composure. For the first time in decades, she felt tears threaten. This human, this supposedly insignificant human, had stripped away every defense and seen the truth of her. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice unsteady. Nothing, David replied honestly. I'm telling you this because I think you deserve to know that someone sees you, really sees you, not what you can do for them or what power you represent, just you. Zara turned to look at him fully. In the moonlight, she could see the kindness in his eyes, the genuine care, and for once her perception wasn't telling her about his worth or potential. It was simply quiet, allowing her to experience this moment without analysis or judgment. The negotiations conclude tomorrow, she said quietly. Earth will receive favorable terms. You've earned them. Thank you, Your Highness. And after that, you return to Earth and I remain here continuing the dance with the next delegation, the next negotiation. David was quiet for a long moment. Unless, unless, the agreement includes provisions for a permanent Earth embassy on Luminar Prime. Someone needs to serve as Earth's permanent liaison to your court. He met her eyes. I could request that assignment. Why would you do that? Zara asked, though her heart was racing. Because in 347 years you've never been wrong about someone, David said. But I've never been truly seen by anyone until now. Maybe we both deserve something different than what we've always known. The truth hit Zara like a physical force. This was his power, not strength or force, but the ability to understand, to connect, to see what others missed and offer exactly what was needed. He'd observed her, learned her, and now offered something she'd thought impossible, genuine connection with someone who couldn't be fooled by her masks. The court will be scandalized, she said. A luminary princess and a human liaison. Let them talk, David replied. I'm used to being underestimated, and you're used to being misunderstood. Maybe together we can just be ourselves. Over the following months, David's assignment to Luminar Prime became permanent. The court did scandalize, the nobles did gossip, but Zara found she didn't care. For the first time in centuries, she had someone who challenged her intellectually, who saw through her strategies, who made her work to stay ahead. David introduced her to human concepts she'd never considered. The value of appearing weak to learn an enemy's true intentions, the power of patience over force, the strength in vulnerability. In return, Zara taught him about the weight of immortality, the burden of perception, the loneliness of always being right. Their relationship evolved slowly, carefully, two brilliant minds learning to trust each other. David never tried to compete with her power. He didn't need to. His strength lay in different directions, in understanding and adaptation, and the quiet courage of being underestimated and using it as advantage. The transformation in Zara was visible to everyone. The bored, distant princess became engaged, animated, genuinely happy for the first time in living memory. She laughed more, challenged her advisors more thoughtfully, approached problems with renewed creativity. King Kethrian, Zara's father, summoned David 6 months into his tenure. "What are you?" the ancient king asked bluntly. "My daughter is 347 years old. Nothing surprises her, nothing challenges her, yet you've done both." "I'm exactly what I appear to be, Your Majesty," David replied calmly. "An average human who learned that being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have." "You've been good for her," the king acknowledged grudgingly. "She's alive again in a way I haven't seen since she was young." "She's been good for me too," David said honestly. "I spent my whole life being invisible. She sees me, really sees me. That's worth more than any power your perception could measure." The king studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The Luminary Empire has stood for 10,000 years because we recognize worth when we see it. I was wrong about you, David Miller. My daughter was not." A year after his arrival, David and Zara stood together in the imperial gardens beneath the 3 moons. She had shed her formal attire for simpler clothing, her blue skin luminescent in the darkness. He stood beside her, no longer hiding his sharp intelligence behind masks of uncertainty. "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked quietly. "Giving up your life on Earth to stay here?" "Every day," David replied, and when she looked at him in hurt surprise, he smiled. "I regret not coming here sooner, not meeting you 100 years ago, not having more time with you." "Humans don't live as long as Luminari," Zara said, voicing the fear she'd been carrying. "You'll age while I remain, eventually." Eventually, I'll die and you'll continue, David finished. I know, but Zara, would you trade these years of genuine connection for centuries more of lonely perfection? She pulled him close, her height advantage allowing her to rest her chin on his head. No, she whispered. Never. You taught me that power isn't everything, that being truly seen is worth more than being invincible. And you taught me that being underestimated is only powerful if you use it to protect something worth protecting, David replied. Like the brilliant, lonely princess who just needed someone brave enough to see past her power to the person underneath. They stood together in the gardens, two unlikely souls who'd found each other across the vastness of space. The luminary princess who'd never been wrong until she was. The human liaison who'd never been remarkable until someone looked close enough to see. And in their connection, they proved that true power isn't always visible to those who only know how to measure strength. Sometimes it lives quietly in patience, in understanding, in the courage to be vulnerable with someone who makes you feel seen. The galaxy would remember their story, not as a tale of conquest or empire, but as proof that the greatest power is often the one you don't see coming until it's already changed everything.